would a bank now say they're not going to have Hugh Edwards as a customer, having not done anything illegal, but there's a moral question, about some people don't like what he's done. That seems pretty extraordinary.
Well, they didn't used to have women, did they? And then it wasn't sort of single mums. And, it's a different sort of value judgment. But, as you say, they can't have that moral judgment there. That's not really for them.
Right, here's the big question. Here's the big question that's been troubling me this morning. Do you feel sorry for Nigel Farage? So, Nigel Farage, a couple of weeks ago, made a big fuss about his bank account. He'd lost his bank account, Coutts, and it turned out that he said at the time that other banks wouldn't take him. He said it was because he was Mr. Brexit. Then someone from Coutts, possibly ill-advisedly, briefed the BBC that actually it wasn't. It was because he didn't have enough money in the bank. So he didn't have £1 million in the bank. He then did this thing called, I can't remember what it's called, where you can basically, it's like an FOI request for your own details. So he's got this big report they produced on him, and they've described him as a reputational risk. The Reputational Risk Committee exited him after considering his views on issues like Brexit. They've said he's seen as a xenophobic and racist, talks about being a fascist in his school days, and is described as a disingenuous grifter. So this is Nigel Farage talking about this document.
It reads rather like a brief that you'd give to a barrister ahead of a serious criminal trial. From the tone of this document, I must be one of the worst human beings ever to have inhabited this planet. But I guess if you were, upper middle class, wealthy, London, metropolitan elite, then that's perhaps how you would view me. Although quite what this has to do with banking and commerce, I don't really know.
It's not a Farage there. All credit to Sheila, who's texted in already, before we even got to that clip, saying, I'm disappointed to hear Times Radio trivialising the dreadful banking scandal that Nigel Farage is highlighting. Shame on you and your prejudice. Nobody's said anything yet, Sheila. I'm just telling you the story. Now, this is pretty extraordinary, isn't it, Kel? If this is the case, I have to say, there's probably lots of things I don't agree with Nigel Farage on, but this just seems like really bad business. If you're going to start making value judgments on every person.
Yeah, I wonder how many clients Coutts would have left.
Yeah. Not least because the circles they move in, you've got to have £1 million in the bank.
Exactly. I do feel sorry for him. Yes, I don't think banks should make decisions on whether you can have an account there based on your political views. I am confused by this story, though, because previously, when they talked about did he have enough money in the account, I can't remember the things, but you have to borrow $1 million and have $3 million in savings or something, don't you? He'd said, oh, yeah, that's quite right. I don't meet that criteria.
Yeah.
And then he was offered another account with NatWest, because Coutts is part of NatWest. And he said, oh, yes, that's right. So now he's gone back to...
And then, it sort of triggered this whole debate about people of political interest.
Yes.
Which actually, it turns out, anyone who's ever met someone in the House of Lords seems to have had trouble getting a bank account, which seems like a separate point. The thing I don't totally understand, Alice, is that it's only Coutts telling everyone that Nigel Farage was one of their customers that has led to any reputational risk, because we don't know who people bank with. And if you're a bank, aren't you in the business of making money rather than turning away people?
Yes, I don't feel remotely sorry for Nigel Farage, because actually I think this is great PR in some ways for him, and he's very good at it. And he could have gone to NatWest, and there's so many other banks he could go to. But I do think I think Coutts has behaved appallingly. I think it's a really odd thing to do, and to have that bigger dossier and spend that much time delving into him. And they said something like 86 times they mentioned Brexit, so that does look like they've got an obsession with that, and they shouldn't care whether or not you're Brexit or Remain, or particularly now. And then mentioning Trump 39 times.
It's very odd.
And the Russians, and some of it actually is quite spurious, and so I don't feel sorry for him, but I do think he's got a right now to bring it up and to talk about it. And before I thought, oh, well, you obviously just don't meet the criteria, as you said. And I think banks have got to step back. They can't start judging who they want and who they don't want. And it's not a club, and it shouldn't be. Although I love the fact that Nigel Farage talks about these sort of upper middle class Londoners in the metropolitan elite, which is pretty much what he is and what they complained he was in some ways. So I think it's complicated, but I definitely think the bank here has made a huge mistake.
Also, he had an account for years, so why now?
Well, that's the other thing. What have they been doing? How slow are they at writing a doc? I mean, we've all put things off, but it's 2023. Have they only just noticed that he's Mr. Brexit and has said things that they might not agree with? No, I think the whole thing is is pretty.
Surely it's because the younger generation have come into Coutts Bank and have looked at him and said, "Why have we got Nigel Farage?"
But maybe this is what happens when the starting point when you set off on banks changing their logos to the pride flag for a month, and you're a bank. The whole point is you have your money there and you can take your money out and they make some money from you. Once you start turning it into a value judgment, or do we like your money and how did you get that money, and that even not what's illegal, but just a sort of moral judgment on your customers.
Yes, I also doubt that if he had millions in there, that they would have done it.
Well, there is also that. There is also that. And I mean, do that? Would a bank now say they're not going to have Hugh Edwards as a customer, having not done anything illegal? But there's a moral question, about some people don't like what he's done. That seems pretty extraordinary.
Well, they didn't used to have women, did they? And then it wasn't sort of single mums. And I mean, it's a different sort of value judgment. But I mean, as you say, they can't have that moral judgment there. That's not really for them.
Lots of people get subject access requests. That was the thing I was looking for. Toby in Cardiff says, I do despise Nigel Farage, but I do think refusing banking services because of political views is troubling. Someone else says the whole thing is hilarious. It sounds like just the kind of thing the EU would hate and put a stop to. Oh, well. It needs to be illegal for banks to be able to behave in this bullying and excluding in offensive way, says Mike in London. Someone else says, David says, playing devil's advocate, could it be that exposed to Trump and Russia wasn't such a big deal until 2023? I just think it's a very weird thing that maybe that this whole idea of companies now having to have a moral compass rather than just behaving legally and trying to make money.
So what, they're going to stop taking money from Saudi princes because they get their money from fossil fuels? I doubt it. I just think this is sort of smacks of hypocrisy.
Yeah. I mean, given with the exception, I know Chris Bryant's made some allegations about Nigel Farage, but given his money just seems to have come from endless appearances on Question Time and now GB News, there's no, if he's not done anything illegal, which there are lots of rules that banks have to abide by, it does seem pretty extraordinary.
Well, the banks, exactly, because of Russia, they do have to abide by that, and they have to be quite careful about that. But they haven't been told they have to be careful about Brexiteers, or they have to be careful about...
Well, that'd be half the country who couldn't have a bank account.
And I suppose if some people who currently have their bank accounts with Coutts decide to leave on the basis of this, they're worried about being, outed in this way by Coutts, then the whole thing might end up backfiring on. But anyway, there we are. Nice to have a conversation about Nigel Farage in which we basically agree with him.